As we all know, Europe's digital future is at a crossroads. Nations across the continent are striving to gain control over their data and infrastructure. But how do you do that without closing yourself off from the global innovation ecosystem? The OpenInfra Foundation has been at the heart of this discussion, enabling open collaboration and trusted infrastructure through open source. And joining us today from the show floor at Open Infra Summit in France, Paris, is Thierry Carrez, General Manager of the Open Infra Foundation. Thierry, at your keynote here, you stressed a lot on sovereignty and resiliency. What does digital sovereignty really mean? And where is the balance between independence and isolationism?
It's a great question. A lot of people are talking about digital sovereignty, obviously, and because it's really top of mind right now, especially in Europe. But they don't necessarily know exactly what they're looking for, and a lot of it is getting more independence from the US or China on running your critical infrastructure and critical workloads. So being more independent, having more control over your infrastructure and workloads. But ultimately, sovereignty is not a state. It's more of a process. It's like security. You're never fully secure. You're never fully sovereign. And so the more resilience you build in your infrastructure, the more acceptable you have to unexpected changes, then you're more able to navigate the complexity or the surprises that the world throws at you every other day now. And so to me, it's all about more independence, more control over your critical workloads. But ultimately, what it really means is more resilience to unexpected changes. So building some amount of flexibility in the face of unforeseen changes.
I feel that you are stressing more on resilience than sovereignty. Can you elaborate on what do you mean here? Because depending on who you talk to, resiliency and sovereignty can mean two different things.
So sovereignty is basically the end goal. It's like if you're fully sovereign, you're fully independent, you can run everything. But there is only so much sovereignty you can get. Sure, you can make sure that the infrastructure you operate is based in your country, but at the same time, if the computers that you're using are built in another country, you still have some amount of dependency on the rest of the world. So it's easier to increase your resilience gradually and than trying to get to a point where you're fully sovereign. So it's like building more safety. It's like it's better to run safe tools. You'll never be completely safe from whatever can happen, but the more safety you build into your tools, the better. It's the same with digital sovereignty. You want to achieve more independence, more control. The more resilience you add, the closer you get to that fully sovereign state. And for infrastructure, it's all about building more local infrastructure so that you don't put your infrastructure in the hands of a different country under the laws of another government. So whatever happens there doesn't affect you anymore. You increased your resiliency. It's not perfect. You're still buying your hardware from companies that are coming from that country, but you increased your immediate resilience to some potential change. And so it's a way to turn that aspiration for sovereignty into something much more actionable. The more resilience you build, the better you are.
No, the fact is that technology is the easy part. The real challenge is people, culture, policies. Can you talk about what are the biggest challenges you have seen in developing local talents and shaping smart regulations around open source?
So OpenInfra software is basically open source software for providing infrastructure. And yes, they can be used combined with Linux and Kubernetes to provide a full cloud native infrastructure, which is really great with our now inclusion within the wider Linux Foundation family. But the OpenInfra basically gives you software that you can use. It's ready, it's stable, it's proven, it's used everywhere. you can use it today to implement your local infrastructure. You don't have to reinvent anything from scratch. You don't have to rewrite software. You don't have to invent anything. It's available. It's available to all. It has like no strings attached. So like if we had started that discussion 15 years ago when OpenStack was started, the software was not mature enough. It was not ready for people to actually adopt it. Now it's ready. So this push for more digital sovereignty, this push for more resilience really comes at the right time for the maturity of those tools and to enable anyone around the world to set up local infrastructure that would give them some resilience in this uncertain world. There is also another aspect. If you think about resilience, it's not just about the geopolitical aspect, right? It's not just about countries or governments making difficult decisions. It's also about being resilient to other type of changes that the world is throwing at you. Like we've seen companies changing direction really quickly, either changing the licensing of their software or increasing the pricing. If you put your software fate in the hands of a single company, you're basically vulnerable to them changing direction drastically. And the other aspect of OpenInfra software that makes it a really good choice if you want to build resilient infrastructure is that it's built from an ecosystem of companies. It's built as an open collaboration with a large number of organizations being involved. So you're not really putting your fate in the hands of a single company, which may change its mind. You're actually relying on a much larger ecosystem that if one of those companies make the wrong choice, you can always use the software in connection with other companies, a larger ecosystem. So OpenInfra is readily available software you can use to build more sovereignty right now, but it also gives you, protects you from any single vendor making any change in direction that will make your investment worthless in the future. So I feel like it's really tackling this resilience theme from different angles, and it's really the solution. OpenInfra is really the solution that the world needs today to navigate a more complex, fast-changing world.
I mean, CRA is a great example. They had great intentions, but because of lack of involvement of open source communities, the implementation needed change. It needed improvement, and you folks work with them, with Linux Foundation, and now we have right kind of CRA, which I feel should be implemented across the globe. There should be different versions of it to ensure more responsible use of open source technologies.
It's a really good point. Like what we've seen is a lot of interest for OpenInfra software as a result of that rise of digital sovereignty concerns, more generally uncertainty in the world. People realize that open source is really a great way to shield themselves from some of that uncertainty. But it doesn't mean there aren't challenges ahead of us from an open source development perspective. And yes, one of the key issues we've identified at the OpenInfra Foundation is the availability of local talent that knows how to run infrastructure. And so that's why we're doing this event here at École Polytechnique in France, which is like France's most prestigious university, because it's at the epicenter of higher education in France. And we have started building collaboration with a lot of universities all around the world to make sure that they teach today their students how to run infrastructure, how to use open source solutions, because that next generation of talent is really hard to find right now. And so it's really a challenge going forward. And we've identified that really early on as a key issue that we need to fix. That's one challenge. Another challenge is some uncertainty around regulation of open source coming forward. And it's I would say the other side of the coin of the success of open source. Now, open source is everywhere, and it's no longer overlooked by legislators. It's getting regulated like anything else. And so that means we need to be very aware of incoming regulation. We need to engage in policy work. I mean, if you talk with Gabriele at Linux Foundation Europe, it's a lot of the work they are doing. And that's why it's one of the key reasons why we've been joining forces with the Linux Foundation, is really to be able to work with them on those policy issues, because we don't have the luxury of ignoring regulation anymore. We don't we're not overlooked anymore. It's the other side of the success of open source. And so that means we need to engage in policy. We need to be as active as the proprietary software companies in talking to legislators that are building the next incoming regulation, so that we stay on top of it, so that we make sure they understand the specificities of open source development, and we avoid any issue in that direction. But with input, it's going to be a really good thing for open source. Like the CRA basically forces people that are using open source and shipping open source software in their product to actually care about the life cycle, the security issues. And I think it's going to be a very good outcome for open source projects if their users are forced to engage with the open source project that they use, because a lot of people are using OpenStack and I don't know about them because they don't have to tell me. But that means they can do bad things with it. And if they're forced to engage with projects, it's going to force them to invest in the community. It's going to force them to give back some of the fixes that they've built for their products. And so it's going to build a lot of better conditions for open source projects in the future if implemented correctly. And that's why we need to engage before the law goes into full action, because we need to make sure that the law is going in favor of open source rather than detrimental to open source.
As you rightly mentioned, this event is being hosted in the university, and I see a lot of grassroots level innovation in Europe. I mean, look at Linux kernel, MySQL, Python, Raspberry Pi, Arduino. A lot of open source projects came from Europe, but we don't see that grassroots movement translate into commercialization. I feel there is a gap between grassroots level movement community versus commercial players who are emerging to openly contribute or talk about open source. Or maybe I'm wrong. So do you see that gap is there?
Yeah, there's definitely a gap, and it's really good point you're making. Even for OpenStack or OpenInfra technologies in general, we're actually seeing more usage and more contribution activity coming from Europe, but not necessarily on the ecosystem side of things. It's smaller companies. It's not necessarily like large companies that are engaging. And so there is a gap between, the developers and the users being there, but the ecosystem not still having to catch up. And that's something we need to work on with our community and make sure that we develop that ecosystem, that local ecosystem that is able to sustain the development of the software and offer solutions for anyone that want to run that software. So, for example, in France, we've been slowly rebuilding that ecosystem, trying to find companies that show an interest in developing their OpenStack technologies, OpenStack product offering, and we make sure that we help them communicate that within the wider ecosystem. But it's going to be a long road, and you're right to identify it as a key challenge for future development of open source here.
The fact is that OpenInfra community, Linux Foundation, it's global. You serve global audience. How do you balance regional needs like Europe, Africa, Asia to focus on sovereignty while also ensuring that we are not building silos, we are not building European open source or Asian open source, so that we can continue to leverage, collaborate, and also enable these regional needs?
Open source is really a global commons. Once it's released under an open source license, anyone can use it. So there is nothing like regional open source. It doesn't exist. You have a regional ecosystem though. You have a regional ecosystem of companies and partners that needs to be developed locally. And right now, it's a lot of companies that are coming either from China or from the US that are the bigger players in the ecosystem. And I think we need bigger players in more of a local the various regions. And what we do at OpenInfra to help address that is we've established two regional hubs, OpenInfra Asia and OpenInfra Europe. Both of them have an advisory board with the members from that region, and we tackle problems that are specific to that region, like gaps, specific issues around talent shortage or the ecosystem not catching up. So we are trying to having those discussions at the regional level and inform the actions of the global foundation as a result. It's very important that the source stays global, that we don't fragment the work. It's going to waste so much effort to duplicate the work in different areas of the world. But we need to make sure that the requirements of each region are taken back into the global development of the software. And it can be tricky. And again, we are trying to reach out to regions where we haven't been as active than before. We've started having Open Infra Days in Africa. We're probably going to have an event in India next year. So it's regions where we weren't as active directly engaging, but I think it's becoming more and more important to be present in those various regions, to hear about what they actually require, to help the local ecosystem to grow and provide a nexus for all of those conversations.
Before we wrap this up, what role do you see OpenInfra will play in helping countries, organizations in building the next generation of sovereign and resilient digital infrastructure, not just for Europe, but for the whole world?
Yeah, so I think the OpenInfra Foundation is occupying an interesting spot within the Linux Foundation. We're trying to be the home for software that helps provide infrastructure for others to deploy their workloads on. So whether your workloads are AI driven or container based or more traditional, we want the software to be able to act as the base for all of it. And so we want whatever workload is coming next, whatever next generation of hype wave is going to come. We want OpenInfra to still be there to help address that. So we want the investment that people make in those open source technologies to be a long lasting investment. We want to make sure that whatever workload comes next in 10 years, 20 years, OpenInfra will still be there to help use open source solutions to drive it. And so that's why we talk so much about the next decade of open infrastructure. How do we stay ahead of the curve, making sure that whatever comes next, we have an open source solutions to drive it? Because that's really the key for convincing all of those governments, all of those companies to invest in open source software. It's a large investment, but it's a long-term investment, and we should convince them that they're on the right path, and they are not going to have to change solutions in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. We'll be there for the long run.
Thierry, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your perspective on Europe's path towards digital sovereignty, digital resiliency. It's quite clear by now that open collaboration and transparent infrastructure are essential to building trust and independence in the digital age. And those who are watching, if your organization is exploring how open source can strengthen your digital foundation, make sure to check out the OpenInfra Foundation and its communities. And don't forget to subscribe to TFR, like this video, and share it with your team. Thanks for watching.